Hey, Carm Capriato here with a refreshing episode to help get our minds off the challenges that we're facing over COVID-19. Now, I do hope that you are safe and doing what is right to protect you, your family, and your team. Now, my praises go out to the healthcare heroes who are in harm's way and to all of our first responders. Now for this episode, put your propeller hat on and listen to a first-hand account from Scott Brown, Chris Chesney, and Dwayne Myers as they share their trip to the Southwest Research Institute as we talk AI and the autonomous car. Now be prepared to be amazed with this episode.
The car's not going to change all that much from what we're seeing coming off the showroom today. It's the data that it's throwing off, being mined and used, and deep learning, machine learning, artificial intelligence applied to make it more efficient.
Welcome, aftermarketers, to Remarkable Results Radio. Listen to learn just one thing from today's episode on your journey to remarkable results. Hey, Carm here. Now, if you don't yet value this pure form of audio aftermarket wisdom, just think about the talk radio that you listen to. What we do here is bring specific aftermarket acumen to you. It's on demand, it's free, and 24/7. This is pure aftermarket networking at your pace. Glad to have you here. And yes, we're the original, the premier aftermarket podcast with the most comprehensive library of lessons from the street that can be used immediately to improve your life and your business, with some exciting tech talk on AI and the autonomous car coming right up. If you earn your living in the automotive aftermarket, and I'm sure you do, this may be your year to get to Apex. New this year, Repair Shop HQ and a fully built-out 6-bay shop on the show floor. The dates are November 3rd through the 5th, 2020 at the Sands Expo and the Caesars Forum in Las Vegas. Registration is open in April. Right now, go to aapexshow.com. Hey, look, I've been quick to adapt to these unparalleled times with talk and content that will help you get to the other side of this crisis. I've got links to important COVID-19 podcasts as well as government links like the CDC, OSHA, and the CARES Act, and many other important documents you probably need to see. Find them all on my homepage, remarkableresults.biz. This episode was recorded at Vision 2020, and my panel, Scott Brown, Chris Chesney, and Dwayne Myers, all podcast alumni. Hey, find the talking points with my guests' bios at remarkableresults.biz/E526. Are you ready for this? Learn how data mining and artificial intelligence will help mitigate traffic problems, increase fuel economy, and provide more safety as the autonomous driverless car gets smarter and closer to reality. You've got a front row seat with Scott, Chris, and Dwayne as they share their experiences coming from the Southwest Research Institute. Now remember, if you've got a friend that needs to hear this at any Remarkable Results Radio podcast, please share it. They'll love all the geek talk. Remember, listen to learn just one thing. Hey, everybody, it's Carm again in the Vision 2020 studio. I just wanted to, for just posterity, this is the last of the interviews in 3 days, about 18 of them under our belt. By the time you may hear this one, I have to tell you there's been some unbelievable interviews. I can't wait to get them out. And this is one of them. I'm not sure where it's going to go, but I do know one thing. You're going to learn an awful lot about tomorrow, the future. With me is Scott Brown from Connie and Dixon Diagnostic Network. Hey, man.
Hey.
And Chris Chesney is with us from CarQuest, WTI, CTI, all those eyes. All those eyes. Glad to have you here. Another always great friend of the podcast. And Dwayne Myers from Dynamic Automotive in Maryland.
How you doing, Carm?
Here's how this started. Chris stopped by. I'm putting up the studio. How you doing? I said, great. And I always ask Chris, what's new? What's going on? And he says, well, last week, a bunch of us from AutoCare on some kind of committee, doesn't matter right now, we went to Southwest Research Institute. And I said, God, I know about them. He says, unbelievable. And he started to tell me what the future may look like based on what they're working on and how autonomy may be or may not be. And he told me some things and I said, stop, time out. Can you guys come and be with me and share the experiences that you had there and how you guys, because you're so well connected, can share what you're thinking and what you know and what we need to pay attention to. So it's Chris, go to you. Start with what you told me a few days ago, how this whole thing started.
Well, I think the challenge for the three of us is to articulate what we saw. In many cases, I know Scott and I stayed an extra day, and we were in a room with scientists and engineers, and they're talking way over our head. And we're looking at each other going, oh, my God, what are they fighting over?
Yeah.
And it wasn't even the car stuff. We're just trying to demonstrate what industry should be doing at Apex next year. But we were privileged enough to sit with the Southwest Research Institute engineers and get a kind of a high-level overview of what they're working on, some cool projects they're working on. Much of it really was around how autonomous vehicles will impact traffic flow and the infrastructure as they're introduced into the traffic pattern, not as they displace the entire fleet of vehicles, but what does 1 or 2 or 10 autonomous vehicles in a traffic pattern do to the traffic pattern?
Yeah.
It was fascinating. And it really boils down to this, in my opinion. We can get into some details, but the car's not going to change all that much from what we're seeing coming off the showroom today. It's the data that it's throwing off, being mined and used, and deep learning, machine learning, artificial intelligence applied to make it more efficient and to make it play in the traffic space better than it ever has. And that can reduce traffic, mitigate traffic problems. It can reduce or increase fuel economy. It can provide more safety, and it's really not changing the car. It's leveraging the data.
So the software is getting written. You had said to me, if there's a texter walking down the road, tell that story.
They're taking and leveraging the anatomy research that sports scientists and sports areas have researched over the last, 15, 20 years. Professional sports teams are analyzing the mechanics of how you run and how you move and trying to provide efficiencies in that so that athletes can perform at a higher level. Or they're taking all of that data and they're plugging that into powerful computers, and then they're able to recognize that person walking down the sidewalk with the cameras today. And Scott can speak more to the camera technology because he's sharing with us on social media a lot of really cool stuff. But they're able to predict or project where that walker who's texting and not paying attention with headphones on, not listening to sound, they can predict when you're going to step off the sidewalk in front of a moving vehicle before you step off the sidewalk, before a human eye can perceive that. They gave us an illustration with kind of dot points of the joints of the person walking, plus a little blue dot out in front of that person predicting where they were going. And before we could see them move, the dot moved out in the middle of the street and the car stopped.
The dot was the computer algorithm's decision.
Prediction.
Yeah.
It was pretty fascinating. Yeah. And to kind of boil it down, they're talking what's called XV, right? Extended vehicle. So a vehicle into the environment. And the things that really fascinated me is that, the Southwest Research Institute, which, by the way, was founded like back in the late 40s after the post-war effort, and it was an oil tycoon that decided to see if he could start figuring out how to solve problems because he knew there was a lot of smart people. So he hired a bunch of engineers and said, you guys go out and find some problems and get somebody else to pay for that effort. And that's how the business is formed. So it's a nonprofit, huge company to do a lot of military stuff. So we were very privileged to see some exciting
Who was telling me, you, Scott, that NASA's a big part of their business?
Yeah.
And so this is a real credible high-tech company. To hear that they're working on this stuff, I guess, is assuring to us as we move into autonomy, because there's 1 million people working on this. Is the Southwest Research Institute going to have more credibility in all these fragmented technology companies that are going on?
I would say so, yeah. They're involved with everything. So Chris was talking about infrastructure and traffic planning, and they modeled out the state of Texas Department of Transportation system. They've now licensed that to Florida, and it's just incredible what they're doing. But they're looking at like the topology, and they're mapping out where a car needs to navigate for best efficiency to and from. And so your same route, the route is not normally the same road.
We'll get back to you. I know Dwayne wants to say something because you were telling me about the camera, the down-facing camera.
Oh, yeah, that was cool.
What's going on, Dwayne?
Carl, we're going to jump around here
all, right.
all over the place.
Well, good.
You said about Southwest Research Institute started in 47. They've built and grown, but what I think people should know what all they do. Yes, I think 39% is with NASA. Building satellites and all that gives them some serious street cred in anyone's circles. Yeah. And then maybe another 19-20% on either military or transportation. DOT, so they're definitely in our facet, but they also do stuff with like the new coronavirus. They're working on that too. Thankfully, we didn't go to that building. It was one we skipped, but this is a complex of buildings all over the place working on tech and bio. The masterminds there, it's got to be amazing. But I think one thing it gives us, they've worked with the OEs for years, and the new technologies rolling out. They're a third party that is neutral, where they're looking to help the industry, combining maybe the aftermarket and the OE, where with the third party, it's not us and them, it's just us.
I see. That's an interesting way to look at it. Huh? Yeah. A person in the middle?
At the end of the day, they're into everything. They're into deep sea exploration. They're into space exploration. They're into medicine. It was fascinating, but obviously we're kind of attracted to some of the technology on mobility. And I think one of the first things they shared with us was the largest robot in the world that is like a gantry arm that has a laser at the end of it that can unpaint or strip the paint off of an aircraft and vacuum that powder up and recover that into, I can't remember what he said, almost a 5-gallon bucket or something. And they can strip an airplane without mess. So today they strip airplanes like you strip a car. They put stripper on them. They're washing all of that down on the ground. They're trying to contain all of that so it doesn't get into the environment. But this arm stretches out over the plane, and a laser goes and moves across the surface of the aircraft and takes the paint off so that they can repaint it. That was fascinating just right out of the gate. And we're talking about stuff outside our world.
So it's not just the tech. Are they actually building the units?
Yeah, they build them and test them.
They build them and test them.
Yeah. One of the things I think, and Dwayne alluded to it, they're a not-for-profit. So some of the technologies they couldn't share with us because they were commissioned by another organization that wanted to keep it private. But much of the technology that they developed, they open source that technology so others can use it. And they encourage their clients to do that so that they're not in it. They said this probably 10 times. They're not in it to get rich. They're in it to create the technology and make it open source so other people can put it into action.
I think that's a crazy thought, to have all these different fiefdoms going on with any kind of particular source code. You guys are so much closer to this. Am I crazy to think that, or is it healthy to have that?
I think it's healthy.
Okay.
I mean, there's probably there's some level of propriety. So the stuff like Chris was talking about, so that was I think a Dutch company or something, that, was trying to figure out a better way for doing that a clean way. Right. And one of the questions I had is I said, oh, you're vacuuming all that out? Are you going to weigh that? Because now you know how much came off the aircraft, because that's weight and balance and all that. And I think he said, I'm not sure yet, or whatever, but
100 pounds went on. I mean, paint's, heavy. It's probably, is it 8 pounds or more a gallon?
They have to weigh an aircraft after it gets painted, to make sure that it's right. But
I find that, by the way, I find paint on an aircraft so fascinating because it's up in minus 40 and, it doesn't shut off. Yeah. It's supposed to, compress, and then it comes down back to an 80-degree Miami, and the plane still looks the same. Yeah. Fascinating. Yeah. The technology in paint, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. Interesting. Hey, Carm here, and I bet you think of your shop management system every day and wonder if it's time to make an important change. A change to a modern, efficient, and powerful system. Now, instead of thinking about your old system, I want you to consider Shopware, a comprehensive cloud-powered shop management system that gives your customers an end-to-end digital experience that will help you sell more services while making your customers happier. And who doesn't want happier customers? In a study of work orders written and shared on Shopware, sharing the digital work order with your customer generated a 12% increase in their likelihood to buy. Now, that translates to additional sales in your business. And with Shopware's proprietary Parts GP Optimizer, you can boost your parts margin with the click of a button and leave behind the pain of managing an old parts matrix. Put solid gross margin dollars back in your business because Shopware puts huge computing power into making you successful. Now it's time. Make the switch to Shopware. Get a free live demonstration at shop-ware.com and find out how you can make more money from happier customers.
Back to the cars. What else did you see, and what can you tell us, and what should we know?
The reason why we're there, we're part of this Auto Care Association ADAS work group, right? So we've got a number of tasks in front of us to try to figure out some better best practices. The engineers, a couple of engineers from Southwest Research are there they're working on this project with us, and they're providing us with some visibility. And earlier last year, we got a number of presentations by these guys showing us some of the cool stuff that they're working on. They're working on the machine vision stuff. They showed us a video where they went to Japan, and they hopped in a taxi, and they asked to stick their GoPro up on the dash of the taxi, and this thing's recording all this data. They just took the video and fed it into their system, and they showed us all this video. And while it's going down the road, it's doing object detection, classification, and I mean, it's doing all this stuff in real time. And I mean, the lines in the road and all this other stuff, it's just fascinating.
From a GoPro.
From a GoPro, yeah. So it's just
So give
video.
me the visual, and we'll figure it out.
Exactly.
Yeah, so, and that's really what's going on. We're trying to make these machines think and understand the way we as humans are, right? So, I mean, and our brains are pretty powerful, right? We see edges and we go, oh, that's a monitor, or that's a microphone, and, there's a truss out there. We recognize that, but.
And it has, the thing, I think they picked Tokyo because it's congestion. And there's so much going on at one time to be able to separate it and pick out the people, the bicycles. What this technology has to eventually do is understand that's a box truck and this is a school bus. And when the school bus sends out its little red flag to stop, the car has to start understanding what that is. Your police officer, the commands they make, what it means to come and go, because that's not connected into the network. It has to understand that on its own. And I think this is like vetting out the algorithms and how they're determining what is what. It's pretty wild to watch just a raw feed of what they're doing.
So that's a police officer. He's got a badge and a hat, and he's got a gun on his side. So we must pay attention to him. That's the only way you could figure it out. You got to teach it what it sees.
Pattern recognition.
Yeah.
We do that as technicians every day. I mean, it's really no different. Humans recognize patterns, and they're over the course of growing up, you recognize what things look like, and you can quickly identify them without even looking at them. I mean, I can tell that's your suitcase over there without looking over there. So they're trying to teach the cameras to do the same thing. You're taking that data, you're making decisions about it quickly, and all that Scott talked about was applied to that texter that's walking down the street. It recognizes that person as a texter, as a pedestrian. So it knows it's a human. I've got to protect that, and it just takes the extra data to know before he steps off the curb that he's stepping off the curb.
Did you see anything where there would be a back-facing camera on the driver at all, or the passengers, and the driver has a reaction to all of this also? Did you hear anything about that?
I mean, they're going to be using cameras in cars. I mean, they're already doing that today, but that's to detect a couple of purposes, right? To detect that the driver's actually paying attention. They can do a number of AI, programs on that. In the future, I know Tesla in the Model 3 has got a center camera on the inside. They're not using it today, but I've been told that that's for the future to monitor the passengers when that thing becomes a robo-taxi.
Yep.
So, well, first of all, if you're touching the center stack and you're playing and looking for a serious channel, there is a gap in attention, ever so slightly. Everything's going to have a sensor behind it, right?
Oh, absolutely. All this technology that we have in play today is just being leveraged. That's the thing I took away from the whole trip is all the things that we've been working on for the last 10 years. I mean, the technology's been here. We just haven't seen it leveraged in the way of artificial intelligence and machine learning and the application of all that data that it's throwing off now we're able to harness that and put it into action and make things more efficient. I think one of probably the technology I saw that in the project I saw that was the most impressive was the NextCart project, where they're trying to take existing technology and squeeze 20% increase in fuel economy out of a vehicle without changing the technology on the vehicle, but by controlling it differently.
Software changes.
Yeah, just taking data from the cloud and from the GPS data that they get off of traffic. Scott said they're mapping all the infrastructure and highways, but taking a Prius and remotely having it mounted to a dyno and controlling the software and the way it interacts with the battery and the motor generator, and then placing it virtually into traffic in Fort Worth, and then controlling that vehicle on the dyno so that it provides some levels of efficiency in traffic virtually in Fort Worth, and seeing what the fuel economy improvements are. And their goal is to improve fuel economy by 20% without changing the technology on the car, but just control it more effectively.
That started off with, remember they did that project with the circle of vehicles? So they had all these vehicles running in the circle, and they had like cruise control going. And so the cars were all moving at the same rate. And then they introduced an error, right? A human error, like one car slowed down, and then it just jerked it was a giant chain reaction. That's what Chris was talking about out on the road. If we can move the traffic all at the same clip, then you're not in the throttle, out of the throttle, and all that other stuff.
I have an analogy. We're waiting at a red light. We're the 15th car. The left green arrow comes up, and Ann says, St. Ann, the lady who makes me do all these great things, she says, "Why does it take so long?" And I says, every time I sit here, I think of when I was in the Army and they say forward, march, and everybody's right foot went out at the same time. And I says, if we could just all get that together, it would be the coolest thing.
Yeah. I think with what Scott was talking about, they found out when the cars were going in a circle, accordion effect, like you have out on your major highways, slowing down traffic, burning more fuel. If one person turned on their cruise control, it became the one with the cadence, saying
exactly
left,
right.
left.
Yeah.
It smoothed it out about 90% better or something. So if they can do the predictive and get it consistent, it'll improve fuel mileage as an extra benefit.
Take the driver out.
Yeah. So actually, in that scenario, I found the video. It's on the National Science Foundation's website.
Okay.
And they actually tracked acceleration, deceleration, braking, and fuel economy during that exercise. And so when that accordion effect kicks in, you've got people accelerating, decelerating, coming to a stop, all of that. One of the next steps that they took was to introduce an autonomous vehicle in the middle of that and map or watch the effect that an autonomous vehicle in the middle of the rest of those vehicles, 19 or so vehicles driving in a circle, how that affected the pattern. And it smoothed it completely out, and the oscillations of acceleration braking slowed down to almost nothing, and the fuel economy increased significantly. So it's really, the thing I got out of all those projects was the introduction of autonomous vehicles into the fleet and into the traffic patterns in the coming years, and it's happening. It's going to happen. The impact that we really didn't think about on fuel economy and traffic mitigation throughout an urban area by just a few vehicles not having to replace every vehicle was shocking to me. I had not thought about how autonomous vehicles would impact other drivers that are driving and controlling the vehicle themselves. It was astonishing.
Just think what could be saved in 5 to 10 more years if they can get a few of these out there to get the traffic patterns more consistent, even if it's slower, but consistent, if they don't have to put an extra lane on a major highway.
Yeah.
What kind of money would that save? Because the traffic now, you're getting to work faster.
Good point.
You're now able to get to work 10 minutes faster. What's that residual benefit there to you?
Oh my God! In L.A. with those 8 lines? Well, you would know, Scott. How big are the lanes?
Oh, it's. I mean, some
are
freeways,
they 8 lanes?
Yeah, some freeways, maybe 6 or so. But,
6 or so.
It's insane, and
it could become unnecessary.
One little accident, and everybody's got to stop and look. And I'm going, come on, guys, let's just get going with it.
That removes the whole rubberneck thing. I mean, and so okay, we're deep in level 3 autonomy, right?
We're at level 2 today. I would say
really.
Yeah.
But if you listen to what Elon Musk says, okay, he says if you reduce the demand on the driver, and that driver can do other things, between on their commute to work or what have you, they can be far more productive, right? I mean, they could accomplish some tasks. You can get creative. You can start thinking about some other thing. Just think of what would happen.
I would love to do that.
Think about what would happen to society if that demand for that workload on that drive into work and back.
We can work
changed.
harder.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Carm, you could be slicing out your podcast while you're driving to work.
Absolutely. Are you kidding me? Chris, I said it and you landed right in my lap on that. I mean, it's just like, we need to work harder. So is the stuff that Southwest Research Institute doing, is it level 3, 4, 5? When are we going to see this stuff?
Well, I mean, what we saw. So we got to do a number of things. The first day we were there, we got a number of presentations by all these different scientists that covered all these different things. Well, midway before lunch, I think we went out for a field trip. Okay, and this is on their property. I don't know how many square miles they have, but it's huge. So we go around and they take us down to this test track, and we arrive and we can see that there's this big Hummer, military type Hummer. And there's some street lights, and there's another car there, like a Ford Fusion, I think it was, right?
That was an MKZ.
Or an MKZ, a Lincoln MKZ. So we got groups, and 3 people would pile in the MKZ, and he goes, okay, we're going to go for a road test. And he just hit the button, and that car is driving itself, okay? And it starts going, and they've all upfitted it with all their gear. It had a LiDAR sensor on top, cameras, radar, and all that stuff. But it had a camera on the bottom camera facing on the ground. They had mapped out all of the features on the ground, and that thing went through a road course with cones, high cones, and I mean, they were very tight. There's no way that any of us could have driven that course at that same pace and made it without knocking over those cones. This thing went through aggressively, just sliced and diced, and it was all hands off.
But was that downward facing camera the key?
Yes. That was the primary input.
But was it downward facing and recording the road? Did it allow the second pass through to work perfectly?
So they had already mapped that out.
Okay,
that's what I.
So if I took that car out and I actually drove it while I was recording the mapping of the detail of the asphalt, and then I pressed that button, it was going to take me right back on the same identical path.
Right. But think about if all the cars out there at some point, if all the cars had these downward facing cameras and they were able to pump up those features upstream, over the air.
Oh my.
And then they basically mapped these roads out. Now they could get super precise. Wow. And that's probably the most critical piece.
Oh my God. You could space. You could space because they would know digitally what part of the road you were on.
GPS isn't all that accurate.
Right.
I mean, we're talking with this technology, millimeters of accuracy.
Yeah.
And so you can drive cars closer together.
Right.
You can put more density on the highway or wherever.
But it's dependent on the surface, right? So it wouldn't work in Denver, in the winter for 4 months of the year or 5 months or what have you. But I mean, it's just fascinating to see all of this science and technology being applied.
Unbelievable. The weather's an unbelievable challenge in all of this too.
Yeah.
That's why they have multiple systems, but they've actually taken we saw 2 of their vehicles. They've gone everywhere from a golf cart to a tractor trailer and outfitted it to drive itself. And I believe they've sent a few vehicles over to Afghanistan of the Hummers. I'm not sure all about it, but they've been doing this for a while, and they're just not doing just the vehicles, it's the infrastructure, with the ITS stations where they know when the lights are going to change, where the cars are communicating. So they're not just vetting, developing, and really putting effort. It's just not a dream. They're making plans to make this happen.
It sounds like 5G is one of the answers to get this data up quick, fast, and back down. is the infrastructure piece going to be critically important? You know, that we're talking to street lights and we're talking to.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think the thing that surprised me was that they didn't really emphasize 5G as much as they did DSRC.
I heard that still may be the staple.
Well, Toyota committed to DSRC, and I think many others will. But 5G is kind of the obvious path, but I don't think that they're banking on that up front. So one form or another, you're going to have some sort of short-range communication between traffic lights to mitigate traffic, to slow you down, to pace you for that next stoplight, that sort of thing. But
DSRC, for anyone who's listening, because we throw acronyms around a lot.
Digital short-range radar. Or
communication.
It's faster than 5G. Still has some lag, even though it's really fast. We're looking for instant because we're talking millimeters.
And so DSRC is much faster?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's an already existing technology.
All right. It's proven.
Yeah. And it's consistent. I think they know what they're going to get. With 5G, you might get in an area that isn't as good of signal as it is in a city.
But DSRC is still cellular?
No, it's right. It's digital short-range communication, but it's a...
Is it V2V?
It's V2, an infrastructure that hangs off a telephone pole that's powered up and cycles the stoplights based on traffic.
Isn't it something like your toll lane?
Yeah, similar to that.
You know, where you put your little box up for your windshield and your toll lane? I think that's probably a good example of what that is.
Yeah, and then, as we move into the future and as 5G becomes more enhanced and robust, and, we're... And whatever exceeds the 5G stuff, right? There'll be a 6G or a 10G or whatever.
We're in one of the most fascinating
G was here earlier.
We're in one of the most fascinating times, guys. It's almost like we have a chance to see the future. I mean, you guys have had. And thanks for coming on and sharing this. It's exciting, scary. Should we worry that we're going to be able to fix this stuff, or will nature find a way?
I think we're going to have more data at our fingertips to be able to slice and dice and make, do inferencing and figure this stuff out. So
I talked to Donnie and I got some insight from him today on that.
Yeah. The other part we didn't even talk about is the security and all the other stuff, because these vehicles are going to be talking to all these systems and there's some very smart guys working on some stuff, and they couldn't even show us all the stuff they're working on, but it's amazing.
Joe Register, that you've interviewed
course.
Many times.
Love Joe.
He's the leader of this work group for ADAS, but he also had his SVI, some of them, the engineers. I've sat in the meetings that Scott and Chris sat in that extra day with the engineers talking. Of course, most of them are all German or they're European, so they have an accent and they're talking engineering stuff. So it's very challenging. But he brought the SVI group in too to listen to this because it's all tied together. Secure interface. It has, it has to happen. So, Joe's definitely assembled an amazing group of people to work on this.
I love to listen to Joe. I mean, he's nonstop. He goes. He's so smart. We've interviewed him 3 times. Go to the website. Just search for Joe Register and be sure to listen. It would be a great episodes to listen to before we get to here, because I think he helps explain those acronyms and what's going on. Thanks for being here and giving us a slice. First of all, you're sharing the stuff that you have the luxury of getting a chance to get inside and know what's going on. And so to the industry, here's 3 people who are respected enough to go out and work on the things we need to know and get us a seat at the table, actually, as all aftermarket professionals. Scott Brown from Connie and Dixon Diagnostic Network, Chris Chesney from CarQuest, and Dwayne Myers from Dynamic Automotive out in Maryland. Thanks for being here, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being on board to listen and learn from the premier automotive aftermarket podcast. Until next time.